A lone rancher discovers a mysterious sack on his doorstep. Inside, remnants of a violent past. When a hardened woman arrives claiming the sack is hers, secrets unravel fast. Blood ties, betrayal, and buried grief ignite a deadly standoff on the prairie. What she carries isn't just memory, it's war. And by the end, both will be changed forever. The wind came in low and mean that evening, curling dust across the ranch yard like it had something to hide. He watched it from the porch, hat tilted forward to shade eyes that had long since stopped blinking at grit. The boards beneath his boots creaked like old bones, and the air carried that dry electric scent of an approaching storm, one that didn't care if the land was ready or not. He didn't expect visitors. Not out here. Not anymore. The dog barked once, a low rumble from inside the barn, then went quiet again. That's what made him look, what made him notice the sack. It wasn't there before, just sitting by the gate now, like it had grown from the dirt or been dropped by a passing ghost. Canvas, tied at the top. Heavy looking. No footprints. No horse tracks. Just the sack and the wind that didn't stop blowing. He walked to it slowly, shotgun still leaning against the doorframe, untouched. He didn't like touching things he didn't recognize anymore. Life had taught him what unexpected things carried. Closer now, he could see the sack wasn't tied tight. The knot was lazy, like whoever left it hadn't expected it to stay closed long. The canvas bulged in strange places. Uneven weight. He crouched, calloused fingers brushing the knot. A faint smell rose from it, smoke, sweat, maybe something sweeter underneath. He hesitated. Then a voice behind him, "Please, take them off." He didn't turn right away. Something in the voice, not fear, not threat. Just weariness, like it had traveled too far for too long and didn't care anymore if it broke. When he stood and turned, she was already there. Not 10 paces away. Slim frame, wrapped in a tattered coat. Hat low, but he could see her eyes, green, sharp. Not desperate. Resigned. "I didn't leave them for you," she said, stepping forward, boots crunching over the gravel. "I left them because I couldn't carry them anymore." He looked back at the sack, then at her. "You know what this is?" "I know exactly what it is." Silence stretched between them. The wind pulled at her coat, and he could see the shape of a revolver at her hip, though she made no move toward it. "I don't take in strays," he said finally. "I'm not asking to stay." "Then what are you asking?" "To look at them one last time. And to leave them behind." He should have told her to go. Sent her on her way, with a warning and a full canteen. He didn't. Something in her voice anchored him. Something in the way she looked at the sack, not like it was a burden, but like it was a body. He bent again and undid the knot. The first thing he saw was a child's shoe. Small. Worn through at the toe. Tied with a ragged string. Then another. A letter, yellowed and rain-stained, folded too many times. A cracked porcelain doll head. A man's belt buckle, heavy with tarnish. Each item pulled at him, and he didn't know why. He heard her shift behind him, but still didn't look. "Those belong to people I used to care about," she said softly. "Some are dead. Some, I hope, are." The rancher felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain. Not yet. Just the early warning of it. He picked up the belt buckle, turned it over. The initials were carved in with a knife. RM. That name hadn't been spoken in these parts in 10 years. Not since the raid at Dry Crossing. He turned to her slowly. "You knew Ransom McKee?" Her eyes met his. Steady. "I did more than know him." He straightened, hand brushing the hem of his coat where his holster rested. "That man murdered 4 settlers. Cut down my brother in his own barn." She nodded once, no apology in her face. "And I buried him with my own hands." They stood there in silence, and the wind carried the scent of rain now, closer. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing you haven't already lost," she said. A cruel answer, but not untrue. He tasted it like copper in his mouth. "You carrying his sins?" he asked. "I carried more than that. I carried his child." The rancher flinched, just slightly. "Where is it?" She looked down at the sack. Gone. There was no noise for a while, but the long breath of wind and the creak of the barn door. Somewhere inside, the dog whimpered. "Why come here?" Because this is where it started. Where it all bled out. And because no one else would know what these meant. No one else would be afraid of them. He looked again at the items, each a symbol, each a story he didn't yet know, didn't want to, but couldn't seem to turn from. Blood calls to blood, and these things carried echoes. He picked up the letter, unfolded it carefully. The ink was almost gone, but the handwriting was clear, crooked, desperate, looped with love. It was addressed to him, not his name, his nickname, one only two people had ever used. He looked up sharply, his voice rough. Who gave you this? She didn't answer, just took a slow step forward and knelt beside the sack, placing a thin bundle of fabric into it, baby clothes, wrapped in twine. His breath caught. He hadn't seen that pattern in years. His mother's stitching. You were never supposed to see any of it, she said. But the world didn't give us choices, just consequences. You married him? I ran from him. Did he know whose blood he spilled? Did you? That silenced him. The wind picked up then, snapping the porch flag, slamming the barn door against its frame. The storm was nearly here. She stood again. I'll be gone by morning. He should have let her go right then. Instead, he picked up the sack and carried it inside. She followed, silent. He placed it gently on the table, then turned to her. If you're staying the night, you'll need to clean up. Spare room's cold, but it's dry. She blinked, surprised. You're not going to ask more questions? I've already heard more than I can carry. Outside, thunder rolled low over the prairie. Inside, the fire cracked once and caught. She didn't speak again that night. Neither did he. But the sack sat between them like a wound left open, and neither dared to close it. The morning broke dull and sullen, sky ironed flat with low clouds that threatened rain, but couldn't decide when. He stood at the stove, coffee boiling too hot in the blackened pot, his hands restless with memory. Behind him, she hadn't moved much since before dawn. She'd taken the spare room, but didn't sleep. He'd heard her floorboards creak, her boots shuffle, the quiet muttering of a woman pacing out the shape of old ghosts. She stepped into the kitchen without ceremony, her coat slung over her shoulder, her shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Her hair was tied back tight, not for neatness, but survival. He watched her silently, waiting to see what face she wore this morning. There was no anger in her, no plea. Just the bone-deep fatigue of someone who knew hiding was just a pause, not a solution. He poured 2 cups without asking and slid one across the table. She sat, cupping the chipped mug with both hands like it held more warmth than it could. You read the letter, she said. I did. And I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with it. Her gaze didn't flinch. Nothing. It wasn't a request. He sipped the coffee, bitter and burnt, just how he liked it. Then why leave it? Why bring it here of all places? Because this land remembers. She gestured toward the fields outside, the brittle grass bending under the wind. Every fence post, every ridge, this land has blood in it. I figured if I left the past here, maybe it'd sink back into the dirt. He stared at her for a long moment. You still think you're just passing through? I know I am. Then don't unpack your grief in my kitchen. She half smiled at that, dry, not cruel. It's not grief I carry. It's consequence. He set the mug down with a dull thunk. You talk like a preacher, but walk like a wanted man. Maybe I've been both. He didn't respond. There was no point. Her kind of pain didn't want sympathy. It wanted space to breathe. The screen door banged in the wind. He glanced toward it, then to the rifle leaning against the wall. Some habits didn't die, even after the war ended. You expecting company? She asked. No. But I never expect what shows up anymore. They sat in a long stretch of silence, not uncomfortable, but wary. 2 wounded animals watching each other from opposite sides of the same fire. He studied her features again, sharp cheekbones, sun-bitten skin, the hard edges softened only slightly by exhaustion. You got a name? He asked. She hesitated. I had one once. That's supposed to be clever? No, just honest. He nodded once, slowly. Fair enough. She traced a crack in the table with her thumb. You ever kill someone who trusted you? His jaw clenched. I've killed people I prayed for. That's worse. He looked away, out the window, where the land stretched wide and empty, too big to bury the past. Maybe. But sometimes prayer's all a man's got after. She stood abruptly. There's something you should see. He followed her outside. The wind was stronger now, carrying the chill of a storm that had decided to stay after all. She led him to the shed out back, a weathered building half swallowed by weeds. Inside, she pulled a tarp from a wooden crate tucked beneath an old plow. It was nailed shut, the lid warped from years of sun and moisture. She looked at him. "Help me." He pried the nails loose with a crowbar, the wood groaning in protest. When the lid came off, he stepped back. Inside were weapons. 6 rifles, all cleaned and oiled. Ammunition. Maps. A tin badge with a silver star dulled by time and ash. He reached in and lifted the badge. "This yours?" "It was my father's. Before he traded it for blood money." "You planning to fight?" "I'm planning to be ready. There's a man coming. A few, maybe. Not for justice. Not for answers. Just to erase what's left of me." "Who?" "My brother. And those he rides with." He stared at her, slow realization tightening his throat. "That letter, that was a warning." "No," she said. "It was a confession." He rubbed his face. "And you came here why? You think I'll help you kill him." "I don't want to kill him." "Then what?" "I want someone to know the truth when it's over." He looked down at the crate, then back at her. "You sure I'm the right man for that? You're the only one left who might care." That struck deeper than he expected. He didn't care, not really. But the way she said it made him want to. Back in the house, she moved like she'd already accepted her fate. He moved like he hadn't decided yet. At dusk, the clouds cracked open and the rain began. It fell slow, steady, more like morning than cleansing. The fire inside flickered low, casting shadows against the far wall where the sack still sat untouched. She stood near it, arms crossed, watching the flames as if expecting them to whisper answers. He watched her, not the fire. Her posture wasn't defeated, just tired. And he realized something then. She hadn't come for protection. She'd come to be understood. She turned suddenly. "You got family?" "Had." "Would you have burned the world for them?" "I did." She nodded, like that was all she needed to know. He poured 2 more mugs of coffee. They drank in silence, the storm outside pressing hard against the windows. The land around them, soaked and dark, whispered of old wars and worse reckonings. And somewhere beyond the hills, the hoofbeats of those who remembered her were drawing closer. The storm had broken in the night, but the air the next morning carried its weight, thick with humidity, heavy with expectation. The ranch felt different now, as if it had heard everything spoken between them and decided to hold its breath. He sat at the edge of the porch, sharpening his knife with slow, deliberate strokes. The woman leaned against a post nearby, eyes scanning the horizon. She hadn't spoken since sunup. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than words. They were close. She'd shown him the map before the rain started, for men riding through the basin, circling wide. Not lawmen. Not bounty hunters. Something worse. Family with a grudge. "They'll come from the south," she said finally, her voice low, certain. "Always did prefer that ridge. Gives cover till you're almost in range." He nodded, but said nothing. He already knew the ground, had buried men on it before. What he didn't know was if he was ready to do it again. She stepped off the porch and crossed to the barn. He followed, boots crunching in the wet dirt. Inside, the rifles she'd unearthed were laid out on the workbench, cleaned, oiled ready. She moved among them with muscle memory, checking chambers, counting rounds. Her movements were efficient, but not cold. There was purpose in every action, like she wasn't just preparing to survive, but to end something. He watched her, trying to see through her calm. "You still sure you don't want to run?" She paused, one hand resting on the grip of a carbine. "Running only works when you have something to run toward. I don't. You got this place now. It's not mine, and I don't want it to burn for my sins." He stepped closer. "Ain't just your fire anymore." Her jaw tightened. She looked down, then back at him. "You don't owe me anything. Doesn't mean I won't stand." She didn't thank him, just loaded the rifle and set it down like punctuation. By midday, they'd built what cover they could, reinforced the porch railing, laid traps near the rear fence line, marked ranges in the dirt with boot prints and nails. Neither spoke much. There was no comfort in words now, only the quiet calculation of how long they might last. When the sun began its slow descent, the first shadow appeared on the ridge. Then another. For in all, just like she'd said, they didn't rush. They didn't need to. He took his place beside the door, rifle resting in the crook of his arm. She knelt behind the overturned table inside, her revolver steady. The sack sat on the mantel untouched, its contents now part of the battleground as much as the cracked floorboards or the dried blood beneath them. The riders stopped 100 yards out. One man dismounted, walked forward slow, tall, thick through the shoulders, wore his hat pulled low and a scarf over his mouth, like a man trying to hide from the truth of his own face. She stood in the doorway before he could stop her, her shoulders square, her voice louder than the wind. "I ain't hiding." The man stopped, pulled the scarf down. His face was rough, sunburnt, thick with beard. Eyes like hers, only colder. "Sister," he said. She didn't flinch. "You lost the right to call me that. You lost the right to carry our name when you ran off with him. That name was already soaked in blood." The man spat in the dirt. "You planning to shoot your way out?" "I'm not planning to go anywhere." He smiled without humor. "Then, this'll be quick." He turned to walk back, and the shot came before he took 3 steps. It wasn't her. It was the rancher. The man fell, shoulder torn open. Screams echoed. The 3 left charged. Gunfire ripped through the yard. Dust and smoke rose in churning columns. The woman fired twice, dropped to reload, moved like someone who'd done this before and didn't want again. The first rider made it to the porch before the rancher caught him, close range, chest level, sent him tumbling backward like a sack of wheat. The second tried the barn. Bad call. The dog exploded from the side like a bullet with teeth. Screaming followed. The last rider dismounted behind the shed and flanked the house. Smart. Dangerous. The woman caught the movement too late. The man crashed through the side window. She turned, gun raised. Too slow. The man tackled her, gun flying from her hand. They slammed into the wall, then the floor. He straddled her, knife drawn, but she didn't scream. She bit his hand and rolled, grabbed a shard of glass from the broken window, jammed it into his throat. The rancher rushed in just as the man fell. She lay beneath the body, chest heaving. He pulled her free, blood on her hands, not all hers. "You good?" he asked. She nodded, breathless. "Not dead yet." Outside, silence settled. No more gunfire. Just the wet slap of blood on earth. Together, they walked the yard. 3 bodies. One crawling, trying to breathe through a ruined shoulder. Her brother. She knelt beside him. He looked up, face pale, lips cracked. "You killed them," he whispered. "You made them into something that needed killing." His eyes darted to the sack through the open door. "You brought it all here." "I brought it home." He coughed once, a rattle that signaled the end was near. "You always were the soft one." She leaned closer. "And you always mistook mercy for weakness." He died before she stood. The rancher didn't speak. He just looked at her. And this time, he didn't see the stranger who'd arrived days before. He saw the woman who had survived herself. She looked down at her hands. "I buried one family. I don't want to bury another." "You won't have to." Inside, the fire burned low, the sack still sitting, but somehow lighter. As if something had finally been let go. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of fresh earth and clean rain. They buried the bodies by first light. The earth gave grudgingly, clumped and heavy from a storm, thick with roots and old bones. She didn't ask for help digging. He didn't offer. Some grief had to be moved by her own hands. By the time the sun cleared the low hills, the last of them were under. For unmarked graves lined the edge of the eastern fence, not far from the cattle trail. She stacked stones atop each one, not to honor them, but to keep them from rising again. He watched her from the porch, coffee cooling in his grip, rifle leaned beside the door. The dog lay at his feet, ribs rising slow. She walked back toward him, face streaked with dirt, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. He noticed her knuckles were torn. Maybe from the shovel. Maybe from the fight. When she reached the porch, she stopped and looked at the sack, still resting just inside the doorway. "You could burn it," he said quietly. "If you're ready." She shook her head. "It's not fire I'm afraid of. It's forgetting." He nodded once. He understood. Some memories needed to hurt. Otherwise, they didn't stay. They didn't speak for a while. Just stood there, watching the land settle back into silence, as if the night before hadn't torn its skin open. She broke the quiet. "He was the only one who ever called me soft. He was wrong." "No," she said, staring at the graves. "He just didn't know that softness could grow teeth." He looked at her differently then, not with caution or pity, but with recognition. She hadn't just survived her past. She'd rewritten its ending. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I don't know." Her voice was low, steady. "I never thought past revenge. Now it's finished, and I'm still standing. You could stay." The words came out more certain than he expected. She glanced at him, not surprised, but curious. "You sure about that?" she asked. He nodded. "This place has room. Hell, it has too much of it." She looked toward the hills, where the morning sun bled gold across the damp fields. "I've never stayed anywhere I wasn't hunted." "Then maybe it's time to find out what happens when no one's chasing you." She gave a small smile, the first real one since she'd arrived. It didn't last long, but it didn't need to. Later that day, she returned to the sack, pulled each item out one by one, laying them gently on the table. The child shoes, the doll's head, the folded letter, the stitched baby clothes, the buckle with RM carved into its back. She touched them all, not like artifacts of sorrow, but like names spoken aloud one final time. He came in quietly, paused by the doorway. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think these were curses, proof I'd never outrun who I was. And now, they're proof I survived it." She bundled the items back into the sack, less like a burden, more like a goodbye. That night, they lit a fire out by the barn. Not for warmth, for ceremony. She dropped the sack into the flames. The leather curled first, then the canvas caught. Smoke rose in ribbons, dark against the stars. Neither of them looked away. When the fire was nothing but embers, she turned to him. "I want to learn how to fix fences." He raised an eyebrow. "Fences." She nodded. "Seems like a good place to start. Keeping something in. Or maybe letting something go." He smiled then, and this time it stayed. "Tomorrow, I'll show you the north line. Cattle love to test it." "I know the feeling." The next morning, she came out before him, gloves on, hair tied back, ready to work. And though neither of them said it, they both knew something had shifted. Not redemption. That wasn't the word. It was something quieter, sturdier, like resolve settling into the soil. The rancher had lost nearly everything. So had she. But now they had a fence to fix, a fire to tend, land that no longer echoed with ghosts, but with breath and movement and chance. The prairie wind still carried sorrow, but it no longer carried fear. And the house, which once held only silence, now held the weight of something almost like hope.